The dynamic within the Bunker household unfolded like a tapestry woven from contradictions, irritation and affection, chaos and routine sternness and tenderness. Stephanie found herself stepping into this tapestry as an additional thread, uncertain of her place among the existing pattern. At first, she observed quietly, learning the rhythm of slammed cabinet doors, Archie's booming voice, Edith's gentle humming, and the unpredictable friction that seemed to bind them. What she did not yet understand was that homes are not perfect structures. They are evolving ecosystems shaped by fears, habits, and incomplete healing. As parent and children's night approached at school, Stephanie felt the weight of absence pressing against her chest. She watched classmates discuss costume changes, parental duets, and rehearsed poems with excitement. Their enthusiasm radiated from a foundation she lacked biological certainty. She had lived through departures, through promises crumbling like paper in the rain. Although she loved Edith and tolerated Archie, the whisper inside her insisted she remain temporary. When Edith suggested singing together, Stephanie felt a rush of warmth, and dread warmth from belonging, dread from vulnerability. Acceptance exposes the heart. Rejection injures it. Archie's resistance to the event masked discomfort he had never learned to articulate. He feared being judged, feared being seen as inadequate, feared disappointing a child through poor performance or absence. Cynicism disguised insecurity. With every sarcastic remark about entertainment, he reinforced emotional armor. But armor grows heavy. When he ultimately chose not to attend, guilt began its slow drip into his conscience-carving channels that would hollow him from the inside. Edith's sudden loss of voice arrived like an omen. Her voice symbolized stability, anchoring the household in warmth. Without it, silence grew loud. Even scribbled notes carried the tension of the unspoken fear, helplessness, and the fragile thread connecting caregiver and child. Stephanie panicked, not simply because of the missed performance, but because illness triggers childhood trauma. When caregivers falter, abandonment becomes a possibility. Archie rushed for medicine, complaining as usual, but beneath his complaints was desperation to maintain control. Control provided him comfort in a world he could no longer predict. Stephanie performed alone. She stood beneath the stage lights, heart-hammering song trembling into the air. She was not simply singing, she was confronting the ghosts of childhood insecurity. When applause filled the auditorium, the sound wrapped her like a blanket, validating her existence. But applause from strangers cannot replace pride from loved ones. Returning home to find Archie absent carved a wound beneath her ribcage. She carried her trophy like an unanswered question. The romantic conflict involving Mr. Clemmer and Judith mirrored Stephanie's fear. Judith believed herself replaceable, caught among memories of a dead wife and comparisons to Edith. Nostalgia can be cruel, shaping current loves in the silhouette of past ones. Jealousy, insecurity, and grief collided in the living room, turning love into accusation. It was Edith's empathy, not logic, that dissolved tension. She understood that hearts often misinterpret eagerness for infatuation, kindness for love, and compliments for intention. Her wisdom stitched back together what fear had torn. Then came the night Stephanie awoke with crippling pain. Children react to pain with instinctive fear because they lack the vocabulary to describe their distress. Edith recognized danger immediately. Archie, convinced he could rationalize anything, minimize symptoms until confronted by medical urgency. The physician's recommendation of surgery collided with Archie's fear of losing control, of making irreversible decisions. His demand for a second opinion stemmed from guilt avoidance rather than medical caution. When the appendix ruptured, the sterile brightness of the hospital transformed Archie's confidence into terror. Waiting outside the operating room, he confronted a truth. He had ignored love exposes weakness. When the doctor emerged and announced her survival relief softened the tension in Archie's jaw. He joked awkwardly, but beneath the joke was gratitude so deep it scared him. Edith, ever the emotional interpreter, saw through the humor to the shaking hands. In the hospital room, surrounded by balloons and hastily organized decorations, Stephanie celebrated her 10th birthday. But when asked her wish, she confessed yearning for her father. Even surrounded by loved children carry the imprint of those who left. They long for answers in empty doorways. The silence afterward spoke louder than words. Archie's face flickered with unspoken pain. He could protect her body, but not her lineage. Returning home, the household slowly rediscovered its rhythm. Then whispers of missing items emerged. Socks timers' keepsakes vanished. At first, confusion masked concern. But when school items also disappeared and the principal summoned, the family panic took hold. The discovery of stolen objects in Stephanie's desk felt like betrayal, but it was something deeper, a silent cry. Children steal security when they cannot borrow reassurance. Each object she took embodied an emotional guarantee, a tangible reminder she feared losing later. When confronted, she confessed that Archie's comments about temporariness had terrified her. Words thrown lightly can slice deeply at 10 years old. Edith comforted with softness. Archie wielded discipline like a shield. Not because he lacked love, but because he expressed it through structure. Punishment, he believed, prevented chaos. Yet as her sobs quieted, he realized something belonging cannot be enforced through fear. Time thawed the tension. Household rituals resumed breakfast banter, evening television arguments about liver. But subtle transformations unfolded. When Stephanie left for school, Archie grunted a goodbye that sounded suspiciously like care. When thunder rattled windows, she found herself leaning against Archie in the living room, and he did not move away. When Edith read bedtime stories, Stephanie drifted to sleep faster, trusting the house would not empty overnight. Seasonal changes marked emotional milestones. Autumn brought school challenges, winter brought hospital bills, and whispered worries. Spring brought laughter from jump rope games outside. Through each transition, Stephanie learned that permanence is built, not promised. Belonging became a verb, not a noun. On a warm afternoon, she discovered Archie examining one of her drawings. The drawing depicted 3 figures holding hands beneath a sun labeled family. Archie coughed, pretended to critique perspective, then folded it carefully, hiding it in a drawer. In that act, he accepted a new identity guardian, not merely caretaker. Meanwhile, Edith nurtured emotional resilience through gentle conversations, encouraging Stephanie to express fear rather than hoard anxiety. She taught through stories, metaphors, and warm desserts. Every dessert held a message: sweetness remains even after bitterness. At school, the teacher forgave her theft, praising honesty and courage. This forgiveness planted a seed. From it grew empathy for others' mistakes. Children who experience grace become adults who offer it. As months passed, the objects stopped disappearing. Instead, Stephanie began giving bracelets, drawings, small crafts. She had learned that gifting anchored relationships more securely than taking. Archie's punishments softened into guidance. He introduced her to documentaries and trivia shows, pretending to test her knowledge while quietly encouraging intellectual growth. She learned about cultures, animals, inventions. Education shifted from punishment into curiosity. One evening, while folding laundry, Stephanie asked whether she could stay forever. The question pierced Archie deeper than anything else. He avoided eye contact, muttered something about, "We'll see." But later alone, he stared at the ceiling and confronted a truth. He loved her. Admitting it meant accepting vulnerability, and vulnerability terrified him. Yet love was already evident. When she sneezed, he appeared with tissue. When she cried, he stood awkwardly nearby until she stopped. When she laughed, he pretended to be annoyed, but listened longer. He watched her grow into the household's emotional axis, balancing Edith's kindness and his rigidity. As summer returned, the neighborhood's energy shifted. Children played outside late into the evening, music drifted from open windows, and fireflies illuminated lawns. Stephanie joined the games confidently, no longer lingering at the doorway. She returned home flushed with joy, and Archie greeted her with the same predictable line: "Don't track dirt on the carpet." But beneath his grumble was pride. The climactic transformation occurred not in crisis, but in quiet. One night, Stephanie hugged Archie tightly before bed. He froze startled, then patted her awkwardly on the back. She whispered thank you for surgery, for birthday cake, for punishments for staying. When she closed her bedroom door, Archie remained in the hallway, heart pounding, realizing this was what fatherhood felt like: overwhelming, inconvenient, terrifying, and priceless. In the end, the household's miracle was not in surviving crisis, it was in choosing each other afterward. Love did not arrive wrapped in fireworks. It settled gradually like dusk. The tapestry became richer, tighter, more resilient. Its threads, once loose, now intertwined. Outside, the world argued about politics, inflation, and identity. Inside, three hearts found sanctuary in imperfection. At last, Stephanie stopped asking if she belonged. She simply lived. Days became weeks, and the emotional foundation within the household settled into a sturdier shape as though crisis had tightened the stitches between them. Stephanie began to anticipate Archie's mood shifts, learning the difference between genuine irritation and the comedic bluster he coded over concern. She could tell when his booming voice masked worry, especially on evenings when the television stayed on longer than usual, the light flickering across his face as he pondered things he would never say aloud. His silence spoke in tremors, and she recognized them the way a child recognizes patterns in rainfall. One morning, she awoke earlier than usual and descended the stairs to find Archie sitting alone at the kitchen table, coffee, untouched, staring at a folded newspaper. He didn't notice her at first, his posture heavy with unspoken weight. She approached quietly, unsure whether to speak. He finally lifted his eyes, offering an uncomfortable half smile. Something in his expression startled her. She saw vulnerability bare unguarded. It frightened her more than his shouting ever did. Vulnerability in adults makes children realize the world is imperfect. She sat beside him, silent but present, and in that silence he found steadiness. Outside the window, the neighborhood buzzed with typical routine. The milk trucks rumble, the neighbor's dog howling at pigeons, the faint chime of a bicycle bell. Life indifferent and continuous flowed around them. Archie finally sipped his coffee, grumbling about its temperature, and the moment dissolved into normalcy. Yet something subtle had changed. Stephanie had glimpsed the hidden architecture of adulthood, the scaffolding of fear, regret, and responsibility. At school, she noticed her teacher treating her differently, not with pity, but with measured gentleness. She was assigned classroom duties, tasks that required trust. When she erased the chalkboard after lessons, her classmates observed quietly, perhaps sensing growth in her posture. Children are intuitive. They detect emotional shifts without vocabulary to describe them. She found herself offering to help others with assignments. Her empathy had roots now. Hardship had nurtured it. Meanwhile, at home, rituals continued, but they gained new layers. Archie complained about liver at dinner again, but this time he took a bite without dramatic protest. Edith widened her eyes in disbelief, but said nothing. Stephanie noticed and smiled. Adaptation had begun. One afternoon, the doorbell rang, and Archie answered it begrudgingly. It was Mr. Clemmer again, bearing gifts of sausages and sympathy for hospital bills. His fiancée Judith joined later, walking with renewed confidence. She thanked Edith for helping her navigate jealousy, admitting that fear of substitution often blinds lovers. Emotional insecurity, she learned, did not vanish through reassurance alone. It required confrontation. Archie, though uncomfortable, offered gruff support, mumbling about how the past should remain buried like bad leftovers. His advice, though, wrapped in humor, held depth. The past, when mishandled, consumes identity. Judith nodded, recognizing truth beneath sarcasm. The conversation shifted to wedding preparations, music guest lists, and cake flavors. Edith offered to bake pastries. Stephanie volunteered to decorate tables. Archie pretended to question why anyone would want to marry on purpose, but his eyes twinkled. Beneath all his cynicism lingered respect for commitment. He simply never learned how to articulate gratitude for companionship. Later that night, after guests departed, Stephanie asked Edith how she had known her father loved her when she was a child. Edith replied that love is often recognized not in grand gestures, but in small consistencies: who shows up, who listens, who stays after arguments fade. Stephanie pondered this quietly. Showing up was a language she understood now. The following week, school assignments required students to write autobiographical essays. Stephanie hesitated. What story did she own? Her life felt fragmented, pieces of old homes, fragments of goodbyes. But as she began to write, she surprised herself. She did not describe loss. She described what she had found: a house where socks were always mismatched, where liver generated debate, where pancakes tasted like weekend mornings, where thunder was no longer frightening. Her teacher praised the essay. Tears filled the teacher's eyes as she read about belonging in unexpected corners. Meanwhile, Archie struggled with taxation forms and bills from Stephanie's surgery. Financial pressure ignited his usual political rants. He condemned bureaucracy, inflation, spending policies, and unnamed government officials. Yet behind every rant lay fear of scarcity. providing financially represented love in his system of belief. He equated failing at finances with failing at fatherhood. When Edith suggested charity support, he refused stubbornly. Pride is a fortress that prevents both invasion and assistance. Edith understood this and allowed him to keep the illusion of control, knowing some battles must be surrendered gracefully to protect tenderness underneath. That spring, children played baseball in the neighborhood park, and Stephanie joined nervously. She struggled initially, missing catches, fumbling throws. But when Archie attended one game, leaning awkwardly against a fence, shouting confusing instructions and complaining about the umpire, she suddenly became fearless. Presence emboldened her. She struck the ball firmly, sprinting to first base as cheers erupted. She glanced back at Archie, who pretended boredom but clenched a fist triumphantly behind his coat pocket. She understood approval sometimes hides behind performance. Days grew longer, sunlight lingering into evening. Stephanie began reading more books, exploring worlds beyond her own. Fiction taught her empathy, history taught her perspective. Science taught her possibility. She shared newfound knowledge at dinner, and Archie responded with feigned disinterest, but secretly enjoyed learning secondhand. Edith looked between them and smiled at how education threaded them together. One night, as Edith prepared supper, a storm gathered. Rain slashed against windows. Lightning fractured sky. Stephanie clutched a pillow, trembling. Archie patrolled the hallway, irritated at nature. Finally, he sat beside her, mumbling about storms being just noise. She leaned against him anyway. He stiffened, then softened. Sometimes reassurance emerges not from wisdom, but proximity. After the storm calm settled, steam rose from rain-soaked streets. In the quiet aftermath, Stephanie asked whether storms ever frightened adults. Archie admitted not often, but sometimes. Fear, he explained, never disappears. It simply changes shape. This admission was revolutionary. Children often imagine adults as fearless titans. Hearing vulnerability reshaped her understanding of courage. The next week, Archie's bar customers complimented Stephanie's singing from the recital. Archie pretended to hate entertainment but let pride leak through. Pride, when unmanaged, becomes arrogance. Pride, when controlled, becomes nourishment. He nearly bragged, then swallowed his words, complaining about jukebox selections instead. But his chest swelled invisibly. Summer arrived with its noisy nights and muggy afternoons. The household fans hummed constantly. Stephanie helped Edith hang laundry outside, feeling sun warm her shoulders. These simple tasks created bonding. Clotheslines became conversation lines. One afternoon, while sorting laundry, Edith found a small handwritten note in Stephanie's pocket. It read, "I am staying." Edith cried quietly in the kitchen. Sometimes emotional breakthroughs appear in whispers, not declarations. Meanwhile, Archie's evolution revealed itself subtly. When neighborhood kids teased Stephanie about her voice, Archie confronted them, pretending to lecture them about property lines and noise ordinances. But the children understood. He was defending her. Protection revealed his paternal instinct in action. Later in private, Archie told Stephanie that people often mock what they do not understand. She nodded. He didn't say she had talent. He said she had courage. Courage, she realized, mattered more. One evening, Stephanie struggled with complex math homework. Numbers twisted into confusion. Edith offered gentle help, but the abstract reasoning eluded her. Archie begrudgingly approached the table. He hated math. But he sat beside Stephanie, tracing numbers with exaggerated confusion until she laughed. In that laughter, anxiety dissolved. She solved the equation. Sometimes support means standing beside frustration, not conquering it. As the year moved forward, holidays approached again. Decorations adorned windows across the neighborhood. Stephanie helped Edith bake cookies, pressing shapes with cutters. Archie stole dough when he thought no one watched. He always left fingerprints on absence. On Christmas morning, wrapped gifts waited under the tree. Among them, a small box from Archie. Inside lay a simple charm bracelet. Heavy circular charms clicked gently. Each charm represented something: a musical note, a small house, a heart. She traced them with trembling fingers. Archie muttered something about clearance sales and walked away quickly. But she saw past his camouflage. She leaned forward and hugged him tightly. His face reddened. He allowed the hug arms hovering uncertainly before finally settling around her shoulders. Time sculpted them into a cohesive unit. Stephanie grew taller. Edith collected new recipes. Archie complained, less laughed more. with every complaint replaced by a joke and every joke by a silent smile. Trust bloomed. Perhaps the most remarkable change was imperceptible. The house no longer felt haunted by temporary echoes. It resonated with permanence. Tension still existed, arguments still occurred, sarcasm still filled air, but beneath it all lay a foundation. One evening, Stephanie asked quietly if love fades. Edith replied only when ignored. Archie added bluntly, "It fades faster if you stop showing up." Stephanie memorized these definitions. Eventually, she stopped checking her suitcase under the bed, stopped hiding tokens of reassurance, stopped counting days since arrival. Permanence no longer required proof. Late one night, as everyone slept, a car door slammed outside. Stephanie jolted awake, fearing return of someone who once abandoned her. She tiptoed to the staircase and found Archie sitting in the dark, watching through the curtains. Without turning, he told her to go back to bed. His tone was protective, not irritated. She obeyed, trusting. That moment mattered. Trust means no longer standing guard alone. Her heart settled. Belonging is not merely staying, it is resting. When autumn returned again, Stephanie walked into school with her head high. She no longer needed stolen objects to anchor herself. Her anchor lived in conversations, pancakes, lectures about television volume, and laughter over burnt toast. Home had woven itself through mundane repetition. Inside the bunker household, flaws remained. Socks still went missing. Arguments still erupted over nothing. Thunderstorms still rattled windows. The world outside remained unpredictable. But inside those walls, three imperfect souls chose each other repeatedly. And choice, she learned, is the purest form of love.